everybody. I'm glad everybody could make it out here tonight. And I think it's going to be a very informative meeting, and that's really what this is all about. We have a monthly meeting at this location, and what our focus really is about voter education. And the better and more informed people are when they go to the voting booth, the better the decisions are that are coming out of it. And one of our real objectives as well is to really hold our government officials accountable. If they say they're going to do X, they do X. And as well, we want to be good cost stewards for our tax money and what have you. So that's part of what the objectives are. And in terms of the actual meeting tonight, sorry, we ended up sitting over here all morning. So in terms of the actual objectives tonight, so I want to get right into it. We really want to cover a lot of material tonight and make sure that people leave here satisfied that they've heard what Proposition 1 and Proposition 2 is, they know the background on it, as well as what the future plans are for managing it. And that's really what our objectives are. I've given Robert Christmann, Superintendent Christmann, a number of questions, which he's going to, through a presentation, answer a number of those questions. And then we want as much, as many questions from the audience here, which I handed out cards for people to write their questions, any concerns. But we're really going to adhere to use of those cards. Sometimes this can be very contentious and/or people can get emotional and/or caught up in the discussion. And in that process, their voice may raise. And we really want to avoid that. We're in a very thin-walled library here tonight. So we really don't want to get into that loud discussion. We want to just keep it very professional, fact-based, and stick to really sharing the information we need to make our best decisions. And so I'm going to really ask the audience not to make comments, be respectful. I'm also going to ask the individuals that are going to be up front here, if someone does shout out a question, I'm going to actually ask them not to answer it, because we really do want to maintain control of the discussion tonight. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to each gentleman, and there's 3 individuals that will be here, that are here, that are going to be sharing information with. It's Superintendent Robert Christmann, President of the Board, David Goris, and Nobumoto, who is the Vice President of the School Board. As well as there's a number of other school board members that are here present tonight. I'm going to just set this up. By the way, I'm Madigan. If you want to do that, I'm thinking you're going to do the presentation standing up, possibly. Does that make sense? Whatever you're most comfortable with, but I'm going to guess
I'll start off. Good evening, everyone. As Mike mentioned, I'm Dave Goris. I'm President of the Board of Education for the school district. I've been President this school year. This is my 10th year serving on the Board of Education. I was on for 6 years, starting in 2000. I was off the board in 2006. Came back by popular demand. I actually asked to come back. And the guy that replaced me had left to move out of town. So, people ask why do you do this. So it really is for the kids and for the children. Finishing up the 10th year. But what we're going to do from a presentation standpoint is I'm going to take you through just kind of like the key milestones that we've had, getting to the point of time where we're at as far as bringing the referendum that's going to be put to the public vote on December 20th in front of you. I think I just have 4 quick slides. This kind of gives you a real, say 50,000 foot level, this is a 100,000 foot level. I mean, it's really just the main points that we've been working on as the Board of Education in the community. Going back almost a year to get to this point where we are right now. We've had tremendous community input, and I'm glad to see, most of the faces in the audience I'm not familiar with. We go to board meetings and see some of the same people, but it's nice to see a different group of people in front of us this evening. So, we're happy to be here, and we certainly want to explain as much in detail as we can, answer your questions, and we do have our commitment that if there's things that we can't answer tonight, we will follow through and get, whether it's through Mike or whatever your vehicle is for questions that come up, get them to reference you. We have set up the The website, the district website has information, we have a Facebook page, and we are responding to questions that come up on that page as well. So one of the things that, that I'll say from a Board of Education standpoint, this, in my opinion, of course everybody has their own opinion, but in my opinion, this is probably the best that the board has done probably in the 10 years that I've been on the board, as far as reaching out to the community, putting as much information as we possibly can. We want to be transparent. We want people to know what's going on, and we put together different vehicles to do that. As I say, I'm very proud of the fact of what we've done, and people can always say you can do more, but we're trying very hard to make sure any question that's out there, we've got a vehicle in place to respond to. And all of us as board members, but Novic's here as well, down the comments in the back, any of us are available whenever to answer questions that come up from the community. So quickly, if we can go to the next slide. Just to give a little background on this. In November of 2010, I'll also mention too, we have our architects are with us tonight, our construction management company, along with a few of our administrators and buildings and grounds. We're back in November of 2010, so roughly a year ago, Canon completed the building conditions survey for the district. This is something that's required every 5 years by State Education Department. Basically, an assessment of every building that we have in the district. We look at everything from the foundation up to the roof. And what it's meant to do is advise and give a report to the district what is needed from a capital project or a facilities maintenance standpoint over the next 5-year period of time. That served as the basis of the work that then followed, starting in January of 2011. We formed a facilities committee, of which the board members served on it. We had roughly 33 people on that initial committee to basically take that document, which was the building conditions survey, and that committee was formed. From March through April, the committee intensively visited every building site in the district, and we had to remember the committee had to report in electronic form or paper form, going through line by line, identifying what each of those lines meant from the building condition survey. That served as the basis for what, basically the maintenance items, the things that need to be taken care of, whether it's leaking pipes or cracking walls or holes in the parking lot, railings that are missing in the music suite at the high school, those types of things with our health and safety, things that need to be addressed to protect our assets, your assets that we all own in the community. This is meant to say identify what needs to be taken care of over a period of time so that it doesn't get to the point where we have to spend much more money to replace it in the future. Basically, the roadmap that we follow as a district, every district follows, is to say, okay, what do we have as a community? There are our assets, we'll educate our children. And what do we need to do and put in place to make sure that we preserve those assets to the best of our ability? That served as the first part of the basis of the building condition survey. That was followed in March through April. The sites, if you go on the next one, Mike. Then May through July, initial committee reports came to the district. Through the committee, basically we ranked every item on the building condition survey. I think we had 5 buildings in the district, and all those items, thousands, if not line items, it had to be basically, the committee looked at every one of those things, things that were identified in the building condition survey. They were enhanced by the committee. We went into basically in the basements of every building, and every, pretty much every classroom, every office, looking at what needed to be done in addition to what was on the building condition survey. So that took from May through July, the initial reports came out. And then from August through October, the committee reviewed programmatic and building enhancements, because the educational foundation that we have as a district, the high school was opened in 1963. So that's almost 50 years old now at this point in time. Many of the things that have been identified in that building haven't been touched in 50 years. The building was designed with the educational model 50 years ago, but and I hope that you know this in some of the communications that are out from the district. Grand Island leads and far exceeds many districts in Western New York from a science and technology standpoint, but yet the facilities that we have to educate the students are inadequate. So that's one of the things that's in the capital project is basically, let's bring up this to a level of standard so we can provide the educational space that we need for the future and build for the future. Next one. Okay. In October, 2 months ago, the Board of Education took the information from the committee. I should mention, in August, after we had completed the building condition survey piece of it, we got onto the programmatic and the other additional items that we're looking for. The committee expanded from 33 to roughly, I think it was 65 or 66. So the committee expanded. We had gone out to the community multiple times, whether through the website, doing articles in the Dispatch, looking for members to join the community. We had a pretty good representation initially. Part of the problem that we had is this dragged on because we looked at so many things. We got into, as I mentioned before, so much level of detail that it took longer and longer than I think any of us would have liked to have. So we had some trail off from members of the committee. But the work that was done, I think, was solid, and we had a really good base for the proposition. So we wrapped up that work in October, and then right at the end of October, I believe it was 26th, the board approved the resolution, basically what we framed as Proposition 1, Proposition 2. Okay, next one, please. And so November, and this is what I mentioned before, it's part of our education campaign, and I think it fits right in with what your charge is and your goal is to educate members of the community on what's going on. And that's why I think we are happy to be here to take part in it. But basically, I mentioned that we have a district website, Facebook, flyers. You've seen the literature that we put out, which has most of the critical information relative to the propositions on these flyers we put out. The bridge will be coming out today. Yeah, I think so. We'll be out with very similar information. So as much information that we can pack into, we call this a trifold, as possible. So it's there, and it serves as the basis. What we wanted to do from a district standpoint, from a communication standpoint, is have one point of reference. So everything that we've got, if you look at the website, look at the flyers, look at the bridge, you're going to find that the information ties from one document to the other. I think in the past, what tends to happen is if we don't have an organized campaign approach to it, you can have some people saying this and some people saying that, then you get the misinformation and miscommunication. But from the standpoint of what we've done to put together, it's a very solid communications campaign information so that you are informed from the standpoint of the questions that come up. So that's the last part. And then, of course, the critical piece is December 20th. We're asking, the voters to come out and vote on the referendum. So the next thing that we've done is Mike had submitted to Mr. Christmann a list of, I think first it was 13 questions and a couple more got added to it. What we've basically done, Bob and I have worked with Lorraine and members of Canon and campus to at least get the information and the answers behind these questions. So what I did as part of this, I just basically took the first part of the question. I'm sorry?
Is that mic working? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. The good news is I'm almost done. Everybody else is going to have to talk louder. Okay, so there was a bunch of questions, a series of questions that Mike had put to the superintendent. We had responded to some of them, put some more information together. And part of what we've got available tonight are either some of that specific. Is either specific questions that were raised in emails to Mr. Christmann, or here the additional questions. So what we're going to do is basically, I think there's maybe 13 or 14 questions up here. I'll read the question, the basis for what was on that, and then between members of the board And, you know, whether it's campus or Canon or Mrs. Ingrassi from the district will respond to and provide some information. So the first question, is there a complete list by site with cost for each capital improvement that details how the cost was arrived at for each site that can be posted? I think that's what we're going to ask about right now.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Christmann, School Superintendent, and I am, Dave Goris has mentioned some of the people here. Let me introduce them to you. Lorraine Grassi is our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Business and Finance. We have two companies that have been working with us in developing all of the information that's being presented to you, and then will be working with us should the propositions be successful on December 22nd. But we have a construction management company who did all the pricing of all the items that are in this, gave us their estimates of it. And I have John Tico and Tom Caruso from Campus Construction right here. We've been working with an architectural firm, Bill Zagrafis and Kim Williams. Canon Design here at Grand Island have been working with them. Basically, the four of them have done a lot of the groundwork that has been requested from the Board of Education. And we also are really fortunate to have with us Mike Neumeister, who's the head of Capital Market Advisors, and they are our financial advisors. So any information that we've had to get on the financing of this, or how we would bond it, how we would do all that stuff, Mike has done a terrific job in working with the school board as well as with the architects and construction managers and getting those estimates. So if you take a look at that first question, which is talking about the individual items, what we have are estimates for the items. We can't tell you that there's a door listed there for $20, but we can tell you in general terms what the work was estimated to cost. And that work was done by our people from Campus Construction Management, and on their recommendations, the board made decisions as to what would be included or not included, because we did obviously have a finite number that we really did not want to go beyond, and so we used their estimates to do that work, and we have the estimates of that in the handout. If you don't have a handout, we'll be glad to give you one of those. That's got the information based on the general overall items. And if you were to take a look at that part of it, you can see the estimates are there by school. And it starts with Sidway. You can see the work that was included in Sidway. And then it goes right through to Peggevine and so on. You can see again what those estimates are. Now those estimates include many things besides just the work. Am I correct? There are all kinds of the fees for our architects and construction management people, as well as the cost of the legal services that we need. So you've got that information there that you can certainly take a look at it. If you have any other questions, why we'd be more than glad to expand upon those at your convenience. Okay. The next question is, how are proposal 1 and proposal 2 being funded? When I go, anybody can join in. Okay, any board members, any of you just jump right in if there's something you'd like to add to the discussion. How are they being funded? Several years ago, this community approved what's called the creation of a capital reserve account. In other words, a savings account that was approved to a maximum of $10 million over a period of 10 years that you had to deposit money in the savings account. We have been putting money into that account because we knew that we had needs in the facility area, that rather than to have a big hit on it at one time. If we put some money in at the end of the year, June 30th, put some in that savings account, we would use it at some point to offset the additional cost of what that capital project would be. We are now in that savings account, we have about $8.1 billion roughly in that neighborhood. And that money will be used to pay for a big portion of the local share of this particular project. In addition, we receive building aid from the state of New York. And each district receives a different percentage of building aid based on their relative wealth. So that when you fill out your income tax forms, if you pay state income tax, as well as on the value of the property in Grand Island, those two areas combine to create a percentage of reimbursement from the state. There are some districts in New York State, around New York City, Westchester and so on, that receive 5% aid on any capital project. We have Niagara Falls that receives 98% aid, because in relative terms it's less wealthy, with less income from the community. Our aid ratio is 82 plus. So that for every dollar that we would spend on an approved capital project, we would get 82+% back from the state of New York. And those are the two areas, state aid plus state capital reserve account, and a local share, which we'll talk about in Proposition 2, that is the basis for how we would fund both proposals 1 and 2. And we can show you how that is broken out. The next question, a list of any risks that may exist, any risk in the amount of state funding. State funding is always a question that comes up. It came up with the last project, it came up with every previous project, it comes up with any project that's presented anywhere in New York State. It's a good question, legitimate question. The arrangement that is there with the state education department is that when a community approves a capital project, you lock in at that point for whatever the aid was that existed at that time. So if this community on December 20th approves the project, we will lock in the 82% plus, and that will be guaranteed by the state of New York. Last year, to give you some idea of the scope of capital project aid, last year was about $2.2 billion was spent out of tax dollars to help for capital project reimbursement. Why would they do that? Because the state feels it's important to help keep the buildings up to date. It also has a very important part on funding jobs in New York State, and historically it's been this way forever and forever. So we do not assume that there will be any risk at this time in the amount of state funding. The state budget begins April 1st. Now each year the state takes a look, they have discussions, and it's possible that they may lower that percentage after April 1 in the new budget. But if it's locked in now, that percentage will stay. So if it should change sometime in the future, then districts across New York State will have to deal with that. But right now, for any vote, at least through March 30th, our reimbursement will be set based on whenever the community can vote before that. How does the capital project appear in the budget that's voted on in May? This has no connection with our regular budget work that we're going to be doing. There is a line that can be used in a regular school budget for capital project work. But if it's in that category, we don't get the reimbursement for it. So it's really makes a lot of sense, really the only kind of sense for a community to have a project approved as a capital project separate from what you put in on the budget. You can imagine we're asking in Proposition 1 for $47 million. That would probably translate to maybe a 500% tax increase. Now I'm making that number up, I don't know, I haven't calculated it. But you couldn't afford to put that anywhere near in a regular budget. So in our school district, $278,000 represents a 1% tax increase. So if anyone wanted to buy $270,000 into $47 million is what you'd be looking at for a tax increase, unless we went with the capital project, which is why we're doing it in that manner.
Yeah, Bob, to clarify, items, capital items that are included in the regular budget are not eligible for state aid generally. Okay, so the reason why you do it in the capital project is you leverage your local dollars with state aid to allow you to do greater amounts of capital projects that are necessary. If we included these same things in or any of these items in our regular budget, we would have to pay it 100% from local dollars as opposed to get the state aid on.
The one point I'll make about that is we do recognize as a Board of Education, when we say we're going to get the state dollars, 8.8% of whatever it works out to be, it is our dollars. I mean, it's not like, we don't consider this to be free money from the state because we all pay into that. So I think sometimes there's a perception out there that we say just taking money from the state, but in fact, we're taking it from our pockets. So we paid into the state. We look at it as an opportunity to get a share of it back. It does change. If the aid ratio does change, it could impact the project. So we want to get the project out there and approved at this point in time. But we do recognize the money is in the state, it is our money. We want to be good stewards of that money.
Okay. We're passing around some information, which is a summary of all the work in all the buildings broken down by building. And we're also sending out for you a copy of how it will be financed. Composition 1, which is the core of all the infrastructure work, the electrical, plumbing, those kinds of things, plus some programmatic items, which again are listed in the brochure. Total is $46,825,000, and that is being paid for 82.6% on state aid. 17.4% of that is a cost related to the savings account on the capital reserve fund. On the proposition 2, it has a referendum value of $4.6 million. Again, we have the same reimbursement from the state at 82.6%, and this time the 17.4% difference is what is being asked for as an additional cost to the taxpayers. It averages roughly about $58,000 a year for a 15-year period. The next question.
I just want to make sure I'm on the right page.
I'm on the page that says this. Okay, so you're right. Since the staff cap includes, is there anything else you should be aware of when they vote relative to this exemption, any potential impact on the school levy? There are a couple things that are estimates, but we give you our very best information when we give them to you. One of those estimates is that all the costs of this will be 100% aided, and we are very confident that it would be somewhere at the worst in the 98 to 99%. So that is one of the assumptions. It still gives us comfort in doing the numbers that we're talking about. The other assumption is a 3% borrowing rate. And right now, and I'll share some information with you, we have the second best financing of any school district in Western New York. Because our bond rating is so good, there's only one other school district in Western New York that has a better bond rating than we do. And because we have that good bond rating, we will be able to borrow at a lesser rate than almost any other school district. So we're confident that our borrowing will be less than the 3% that we plugged in here for the numbers. So if we may be off a little bit on the cost of the reimbursement from the state, we're going to make it up for on the borrowing that we have. So we feel pretty confident in the numbers we just shared with you that they would be accurate numbers. And is there any impact on the school levy? There is an impact on the school levy should the Proposition 2 pass, and that is the $58,000 increase. It would be required from the local taxpayers for 15 years. That's where we get the 0.2% is what the increase would be if Proposition 2 passes. There is no increase at all in the passage of Proposition 1 because we are using the state reimbursement plus the savings account in the capital reserve to cover that cost of that proposition.
That's $58,000 per year.
$58,000 per year for 15 years.
And each, what's the number, Bob? Approximately 1% of a tax
1%
increase.
is $278,000.
So if we raise taxes by 1%, it raises $278,000 for the district.
Okay.
But if I may, one of the things that the board read into this this process was to come out with an express goal of putting together a proposition that has no incremental tax impact. And that's why you see Proposition 1 and 2. I'm not sure if that was clear. You know, people are going to say, well, why do you have 2? The reason is we want to put something out there that fixes the nuts and bolts of the school system with no additional or incremental tax levy. We have a Proposition 2 because there are enough important things that we thought had to be done or should be done. But that gives the voters a choice, essentially. So that's something the board went consciously into this starting back in probably January, certainly since I've been on the board. So that's an important fact. We wanted to go into this using the savings that we put away, like Bob just mentioned, but having no incremental tax increases to the residents.
The next question that we've already addressed, I mentioned again, how was the capital reserve on hand? How was it created? That was created by a vote of the community in 2008. It set the $10 million maximum and a period of 10 years to put up to that amount of money. Once it's put in a capital reserve account, the only way that can be expended is if the community says you can spend it on that purpose. That's why in all the written language that lawyers have to put together in every school district isn't anything we did. But you'll see it notes that there will be an amount of money from the capital reserve fund that will be used to cover Proposition 1.
I think there was a question, Mike, that you had in one of the emails relative to, if there's things that need to be done in the district, which, are part of what this capital project is, why couldn't we have done them? Because the voters put that money aside for a capital project, but we can't spend that money for a capital project to approve it. So it's kind of like, it's not a catch-22, but you basically give us the authorization to save the money, but then you've got to be, as part of the process, vote and say, yes, what you propose spending that money, our money on, we agree you can spend it on. So we can't just take that money and say, okay, you gave us a capital reserve, as a board, we're going to decide what to spend it on without your approval. So that's kind of that's the check on us putting away, you putting away that money in our trust.
So then,
We'll ask
oh, I'm sorry.
questions at the
I'm
end.
sorry.
Sorry.
My bad. My bad.
Okay, next slide. I mentioned this as well too. Is there currently a capital line? There is not a, is there a capital line?
Not in this current budget, but the board has talked about there will be one to cover HVAC tanks in the future. If we get to that point this year, it'd be about $50,000.
Okay. Is there any expiration on the funding? No, there is not. In the savings account, will the December vote have any impact beyond the 0.2%? The answer is no, it will not. It is limited to 0.2% of $58,000 per year. Next slide. Will there be a contract in place committing New York State to fully fund? We do not have contracts. Districts don't have contracts with New York State. What we would have would be contracts with the people, the contractors, who would be doing the work. So we'll have a general contract with a general contractor, we have a contract with an electrical contractor, those kinds of things. either one of you want to expand on who receives contracts? No?
You have, the district will have a contract with the architect, will have a contract with attorneys or legal counsel, with campus, and then depending on if the proposition passes, then we will come up with an actual phasing plan of best delivery, and we will have multiple prime contracts, probably be somewhere between 12 and 20 prime contracts through the course of the project.
And a couple examples of those prime contracts would be for what kind of work?
We may have some specialty work like window work and some site work, but other than that, it would be plumbing, heating, electric, and general construction.
And part of that process is we're required to get bids, and we'll get bids from contractors for the work. And at some point in time, those bids will be opened, and that'll be the cost that ultimately we'll be paying for the work. The board, in looking at this, had determined that it was a fairly favorable time to go out and try to get work done. That we could get work done from contractors cheaper now than we could in other times. And that was part of the process of the analysis we made in terms of why to do it now. In terms of that, so.
Well, that's right. Contractors looking for work right now. And by going out at this point, and everything is low bid. And so we set out, here's the work. You may get 5, 6, 10 different companies bidding to do the work. Whoever submits the low bid gets the job. And right now, because of the fact that there is not a good work climate for jobs, this is a good opportunity for us to go ahead. The only thing that counts, we have all the estimates you want, the only thing that's going to count is what comes in on those bids. And typically what happens is that the construction management people who give us those estimates are not going to have those cost estimates less than what the bids will be. And you can't have an estimate of $8 and the low bid comes out to be 10. It doesn't happen that way. But they can have an estimate of 10 and have the bid come in at 8. And we absolutely believe that when the bids come in, when they open those envelopes, and we would make this a public opportunity for anyone to come, and we'll give you the estimate of what we had for the bid, and we'll open the bids right in front of you, and you can see how we're doing. But that's what triggers what the actual cost will be for the project. And I'm 100% confident that those bids will come in less than what the estimates are for this work. We'll be accountable to manage it. Well, we've got a lot of people. Ultimately, the Board of Education, the Superintendent, we have a construction management company. And could you maybe just mention a little bit how you would be involved in managing for any errors and cost overruns? And give some idea what your work.
There is no cost overruns. So number one is that we manage the budget starting from the design perspectives. Campus will be doing 3 estimates after a schematic, design development, and construction documents phase. Once it goes into SED for approval, we will do one last estimate. We will know pretty much concisely where the bids should come in at. And then once we award contracts, the board will award the contracts, we then manage the budget on a monthly basis and track all of the contractors, track their applications for payment, work with the business office, and then manage any of the change directives that may have to occur as part of the capital project. And we update and do that to the board every month.
What hurts a little bit, it's easy to understand how somebody could believe this. You can get, if you build a bridge, you can have a cost overrun. You build a road, you can have a cost overrun. School districts are not able legally to spend a penny more than whatever the community approved. So if this community approves $48 million, legally you can't spend a penny more than that. There are no cost overruns on school district projects in New York State. When you reach that total, you're finished. Wherever it may be, you're done. You cannot spend another penny. And that's the difference between a public works project and a school project. And we have more auditors we can shake a stick at. would be the first ones to publicly share that somehow that happened, it can't happen, it won't happen. And no school district will go over that knowing that it's illegal to do so. In what ways were the taxpayers represented? Dave talked in the beginning. We wanted to go about doing this project differently from the last one that was presented. And so what we did is we sent out information through the dispatch and through the bridge that goes out to 8,000 residents. Join us, sit down with us, talk to us, be part of planning what it is that would be presented to the public. And we repeatedly asked for help from the community, and we did receive very good response of about 35 largely community members and some staff that met basically once a week for months and months and months. And then as we got closer to the end, we expanded it again. We brought on another 25 community members and staff to help us with the final evaluation of what those items are. So I do think that the residents were well represented, and the plans to minimize the cost were there because we had limits going in. We knew that we would not, as I think Glenn said, there would not be a project, one of the proposals, it would be more than a zero tax increase.
Let me just jump in real quick. And as far as the committee went on and did its work, and I mentioned earlier, we talked about building condition survey, we talked about the programmatic need, we talked about other things that the teachers, mainly in the schools, said some of these we need, some of these would be nice to have, some of these, look at everything. But the process that the committee went through, we went through it line by line, and some of those items which, you may say and I may say, that would be nice to have, they're not part of the project. And we really worked very hard to take the 1,000 lines of data and say, what really is, what's essential for us to get done. So from the standpoint of, asking the question about, cost stewardship, I feel very strongly that, the package that we put together, the propositions, do represent, good value to the community. There isn't, I've heard some terms, some fluff and some other, there really isn't fluff in this project. These are things that are essentially get done. Because I think the original estimates that we had was upward to what, $90 million, depending on, which date it was or whatever. So we basically pared it down to 50% of that. Now that doesn't, it doesn't mean that there aren't items in there that we're not doing as part of the project that future boards will have to come back to the community and say, now we need to get this done. So we're taking our best shot at this right now to do as much as we possibly can in the economic climate that we're in, but recognize that once we get this project done and underway, a few years from now, there are buildings do continue to deteriorate and needs change. But this is, I think, in my opinion, the best project that we put together for this point in time, and we were very careful to make sure that the essential elements were put in there, and big things that are necessary, changes that are necessary to bring some from a programmatic standpoint are also included. But it isn't the Cadillac of what we could have done from from the standpoint of the district. Basically, I don't want to say it's a Chevy, but it's something between the, certainly isn't a Yugo, but it's what the community needs, and I think our kids need. So
there's one other thing that's not here, but I would want to mention it in the interest of full disclosure, and maybe there'll be some questions with it later on. Of the $8.1 million in the savings account, the Board of Education allocated about $7.3 million as an offset to Proposition 1, so that you would still have everything in Proposition 1 that would not call for an additional tax increase. But the board set aside $800,000 of that $8.1 million because we have a need for a transportation center. The current transportation center at Sidway School, as we went through and did the building condition survey, they estimated that the work to upgrade the transportation center was more to fix it than it was to build new. That's how bad the condition over there is. If you've never seen it, it's an interesting setup because if you put two buses in there to work on both of them, There's one of them sticking out because it's not big enough to house the 2 buses. So if you're doing some work in the wintertime, it makes it difficult for the mechanics. They can't close the door. And the only way that you can get those buses out is to go backwards because the post office, there's no door there. So if the first bus is done, the first bus sits there until the second bus is done. So what we've done is we've taken $800,000 of that savings account and we will apply it, the board will apply it, to a new transportation center, but we can't vote on it now because we don't have a location. We're working with the town, we're working with other people to try to find a central location for us to build that transportation center. But when that transportation center is proposed, because we have an estimate of what we would need in that transportation center, the $800,000 that the board has put aside will make the transportation center at no additional cost. It's about a $5 million estimate, 800,000 savings, so that's that 17.4%. But we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. Once the site has been determined, we have to do an environmental study of it required by law, and then we would be coming to the community for that vote for the transportation center.
And I may add on the transportation center, after the committee walked through the transportation center and then looked at the various needs of the transportation center, discussed it at a subsequent meeting, it was probably the quickest discussion that we had in terms of where to go with respect to that. I mean, there was consensus very quickly that fixing the current place didn't make sense. We needed to do something different. And I mean, that was a discussion that went, everybody was on board with that without any significant discussion.
Plus the other, I mean,
It was so obvious.
The other contributing factor that not only, the condition of it, but the location of it,
Correct.
being at the primary school is a safety consideration.
We have with us Jack Burns, Director of Transportation. He's been in that job for 59 years, I think. So he knows what that transportation center is. Could you just get a wave so they...
Hi, folks.
If any of you have grown up in the island, you probably were in a bus that he worked the route on.
Just a process check, about 9 minutes.
Okay, we're doing good here.
Okay.
Why is it important to pass this budget? This is the one question, in a sense, I can't answer. And I can't answer it because I am prohibited by law from telling you to vote yes. I can't tell you that. The board can't tell you that. All we can do is present the information, and each one of you will reach your own conclusions. So why is it important to pass it? Well, here are the things that we're talking about. And again, you'll have to reach your own conclusions to whether you think it's important to pass it or not. How are the funds authorized and who will oversee the project? We talked a little bit about that. Our construction management people will be there to supervise it on a day-to-day basis. They will be on site. They will be watching the quality of the work as well as the cost of the work. There'll be weekly meetings at least with the contractors to make sure that it's on time and the budgeting that was allocated for it is not going over budget for any individual item. We have our assistant superintendent who will have a responsibility for that as well. And again, the ultimate authority is the Board of Education. We have asked, this question came in a couple days ago. What was the cost, what was the actual cost at the end of the project? We are assured that the cost of that we spent on that was less than or not over that. The cost that was approved for by the community. But for us to pull that out, there's a lot of documentation. We'd be glad to share that if anyone wanted to come in and take a look. But it would take some time to pull that together for anybody to do that, right? Right. And part of the reason, if you could explain the reason why.
Well, why would we?
How the numbers on the last project from 2006 maybe?
99, 18.4 million project is the state changed some of the way financing happened midway through the point. So now what we get is every year an annual rate of what we're supposed to fund at, but things that happened prior to that go under like a different rule. So then you got to piece all those together. And you have to take all the costs and all of the expenditures against what was being aided and might be decided. It's a complicated calculation which requires us to obtain a lot of documents here now in the basement to make that computation. But we haven't been.
But it's all been audited,
Yeah, it's been audited.
it's all been submitted to the state of New York.
The last project we did was an Excel aided
Yeah.
project, which was about 4 or 5 years ago.
Right, that was about $3 million.
And that was a relatively small project that was funded totally by state aid, because the state at that point in time gave each school district throughout New York State, or most of them at least,
Yeah, that was money
monies to
spent it on
specifically
this
expend on capital projects. So we used the state aid plus the Excel monies, which the state gave us, to fully fund a project that was about a little bit more than $3 million. That was the last project that the district did.
And then last question.
Sure. I appreciate the question because I wish more people would ask. But so the question was, why did I vote no to the referendum? And just as a quick recap, we had $90 million worth of work. We had, in my estimation, 550 different line items that we went through. We ranked all those things. Again, we tried to put a proposition that had a zero tax impact and then something that had a modest one. We got down to the 99% of it, so $46,400,000.